All right, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll get started where everyone else does. As far as earliest childhood memory, what are we getting into?
So I grew up living in a small town in Southern Illinois.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Murfreesboro, Illinois, which is right down by Carbondale.
Okay.
And then
I know Carbondale.
Then we moved to a little town called Olney, Olney. It's home of the white squirrels.
Okay.
We moved there when I was about 4 years old. And my earliest memory is we had a big black lab named Josh, and we lived in a kind of a split level home. And I had a dream about my grandma serving me applesauce when I was 4 years old. And we lived in a back room that we would jump on the bed. So I've got a lot of memories from that house.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the earliest memories. I don't remember living in Murfreesboro or Carbondale area, but I do remember being in Olney when I was 4.
Okay.
So
a couple questions coming straight off the bat. Home of the white squirrels. Was there like one albino squirrel there, or was there a bunch of white squirrels?
No, there was a bunch. So most of them lived in town.
Okay.
But it's Olney now is a town of about 8,000 people, roughly.
Yeah.
And the county probably has, and I'm guessing, the county probably has 10,000 people total.
Yeah.
So everybody almost lives in town. Very rural area, lots of farmers. But it started to get developed a little bit more back in the mid 1900s when the oil boom was going on.
Gotcha.
But the home of the white squirrels, they're albino, and they still are there. You still see them every once in a while when you're in there. Yep.
I'll point out like a black squirrel to Adeline, or like a white squirrel. Like that's not normal. We don't see those a lot. So being 4 and then moving on to what you do remember, were you around a family a lot? What was going on there?
Yeah. So my dad was a traveling salesman. So my dad set up fundraisers in schools. So back when you used to sell, one of the popular items that he sold was called Rex Cleaner. It was like a cleaner that he would go in and he would raise money for the football team at the high school or for the band. And they would go out and sell this stuff and he would organize it and put it all together. Well, he did that all throughout Southern Illinois. But the biggest time of year to do that is in the fall.
Okay.
So the rest of the year, my dad had a lot of time off.
Yeah.
So my dad was around a lot. I remember my dad always having projects. Real handy guy. If he wasn't handy, he certainly acted like he was. We built a lot of things. I remember playing outside with my I have 2 brothers, one older, one younger. Our dog Josh was a big black lab. And I distinctly remember when we would get snow, my dad would wrap the rope of the sled around Josh and he would pull us up and down the street.
Yeah.
So lots of family time. My grandma and grandpas lived in the same town. My aunts and uncles lived in the same town. But when we were about 6 years old, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, 84 to 85, we moved to Indianapolis.
Okay.
So we lived in Indianapolis for a couple of years and had a lot of good memories there, playing outside. My dad took a management position with his job, with his company, and then we ended up going back to Olney a couple of years later. He wanted to get out of management, go back into sales.
Yeah.
And so I spent my childhood all the way up into about 7th grade in a small town, very Goonies-esque, lots of bike riding, lots of adventures, or at least what we thought were adventures. Very little. I mean, we had supervision. My mom was pretty strict growing up, but not so much that she was just say, hey, be home. Summers were spent, be home by 4. You got baseball at 5. And so we spent a lot of time outside. Yeah. My brothers and I were pretty close. My older brother, especially, he was about 1.5 years older than me, 2 years in grades. Yeah. So he was always two grades ahead of me. Him and I were like twins. Yeah. Until he about reached high school, then we kind of started to separate a little bit. But
how do you feel like you guys formed those bonds? Was it just because you did so much together? Did you like the same things?
Yeah, I think it was both. A lot of it was my older brother and I were so close in age that we just kind of matured at the same time. Okay. And we just played together a lot. We did a lot of togetherness. Yeah. We had a railroad track that ran behind our house and there was a little bit of a wooded area and then our house was out there. We kind of felt, we grew up in that era. Like I said, the Goonies, Karate Kid, like all these adventure and like fun action movies. Yeah. And we always felt like it was our duty to protect the house. So we would go out into the woods and, Rambo was popular and we would build forts and we had little arsenals with knives and firecrackers. And that's what we protected the house with. Yeah. So we had a lot of adventures like that. And I think that created a bond that we took, as we got older. And we still see each other today. We're not as close as we once were, but.
So having all those adventures outside, did you watch a lot of TV as well? Only when the weather was bad? What was TV back then for you?
So for us, we always said, unless it was lightning and thundering out, we pretty much were trying to be outside. Yeah. Even on rainy days, we enjoyed playing outside. Yeah. I do remember watching movies. You know, we didn't have the satellite TV like our friends did. So the movies we watched were either VHS or we went to the movies. Yeah. If we were at a buddy's house, sometimes they would pull up their HBO and we'd be able to, watch some satellite movies and stuff like that. And we had family TV time in the evening. We watched, you may not even remember these shows, but Family Ties was a big one with Michael J. Fox. We would watch Silver Spoons was a family show we used to watch. So there was some Cheers. We used to watch Cheers back in the day. It was a comedy that we would watch as a family.
I know that one.
And so, but that was in the evenings. And I don't recall spending a ton of time around the TV. Yeah. Saturday morning cartoons was a big one. Looney Tunes. Yeah. Those were big. But other than that, we tried to be outside as much as possible.
And then as far as eating went, were you cooking for yourself? Was mom making everything?
So we laugh to this day. Mom cooked for efficiency and numbers. Yeah. And dad was more like the chef. Okay. So mom's food was always good. Yeah. I never, I grew up eating a lot of good stuff, but it was casseroles, crock pots. Yeah. And my brothers and I would just eat whatever was there. And then the funny thing that I kind of reflect on is there really was no, if you didn't like this, well, let me get you something else. Yeah. It was like, this is what's for dinner. If you don't like it, then you're not eating. Yeah. And so mom was always kind of the weekly, I call her more of the line cook, just constantly churning out food for us. And then dad would spend weekends, cooking breakfast in the morning, pancakes, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very nice. So for school, what was your day like? Were you just trying to push through school and get to hang out with your friends and your buddies, or did you enjoy some of the schooling?
I even enjoyed school all the way through high school.
Oh, awesome.
So it was challenging, but I always looked at it as it was an opportunity to be around friends. It was an opportunity to be, I loved playing sports. And obviously if you didn't cut the grades, you couldn't play sports. Yeah. So school to me was the environment that I was immersed in. Mm-hmm. I didn't always love homework, but being at school really wasn't that horrible for me.
That's nice.
I always saw it as not, you loved recess and PE. And I really kind of clung to things like math. I really enjoyed math. It was the figuring things out and watching numbers. I liked all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But we lived within walking distance to our grade school. Oh, nice. And then, once I got to middle school, I ended up, I lived up here in the Chicagoland area. Okay. But I enjoyed school. I mean, my parents preached, more probably a well-rounded environment than just everything was about school. Mm. But we did. My mom and dad would reward good grades, and we had goals and things we could set for school. But
So when they said they wanted you to do a good job, and that was like, hey, if you get an A, you'll get this, and you were able to see in the future and like, oh, I'm going to keep working hard instead of like every day you needed some kind of reminder.
I am one of those that even probably from as a small kid, I didn't need a lot of direction from like my parents, like saying, hey, you said you're going to get good grades. Now you need to get up and like remind me to constantly do that. All they had to do was say, if you do this, that will be rewarded. And that's all I needed to like create the environment for me to thrive. I will say I am not good with idle hands. So from a kid, if I didn't have a goal, I probably would lay around all day. Right. I would lay around and I'd watch cartoons all Saturday unless mom was like, hey, no, you need to get out and go. And then once I'm going, then I didn't want to go back and be lazy anymore.
How did you feel when you were being lazy? Was there reflection afterwards? Like, oh, I feel terrible. Or were you pretty stable mentally?
Not as a kid. Okay. As a kid, I just probably didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. As I grew up to be more of a high schooler and into college, I realized laying around and being lazy came very natural to me, which sounds crazy for a lot of people that know me. But I never felt good at the end of it.
Yeah.
Right. So, for instance, fast forward to the college days where I didn't have a lot of accountability.
Yeah.
If I wanted to lay around and watch college football all day, I would just lay around and watch. And then by Saturday night, I felt like crap.
Yeah.
Right. Because what did you really accomplish? Nothing.
Yeah.
It was enjoyable.
You learned about your favorite team.
Sure. But it wasn't something that gave you dignity.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And so I think I learned early on with a couple little, hiccups in the late high school and college days that work is good. Whether you're working yourself through school as a young kid, like learning how to like practice your homework and do your math. We used to call them math. Was it Mad Minutes?
Okay.
Right. Where you would sit down and this was in elementary school in school and you had 100 math problems.
Oh yeah.
And
See how far
you could get in a minute.
But if you missed one, it stopped at that missed one.
So, and I wanted to be really good at that. Yeah. So in order to be good, you had to have repetition, right? Yeah. So I would practice these repetitions so I could be good at Mad Minutes because it was a competition. Well, if I didn't have the competition, would I have put the reps in to be good at, because it was competition against your buddy, against, there was always a smart girl. For whatever reason, like I always was in class with girls that were just like ridiculously smart.
For me, I think it was like Emily Larson. And like she always had another friend that was also smart, and I'd be like, "I got an A." She's like, "I got an A+." Like, dang it!
It was. My wife laughs. I can still name some of these girls. Jessica Bateman, Lori Jennings, like Lynn Bunt, like all these girls from elementary school that were always really smart. At Courtney Franklin, like they're gonna laugh if they hear it, but they were smart, and I wanted to beat them, right? And so in order to be good, I had to practice. It didn't come super naturally to me, so that kind of carried over into my life now. Yeah. Where like, I know that I could probably be good at most things that I try as long as I put the work in. Right.
And I think that's where our paths separated at a young age. I was, at a young age told I was, smart, unfortunately, and that things came easily to me. So I didn't try very hard, and like, if I did well without trying hard, that was like a sign of like intelligence and it was being cool. And my cousins, the ones that didn't try very hard and played video games and still scored really high, like those are the ones our family members were impressed with, not the ones that went to like an Ivy League and they tried really hard. So for me, I had a very hard time figuring out like work was okay. Like that's okay to do. So was it family members that said, "Hey, you just had to work hard," or you just saw other people working, or how did you see that?
So I think largely growing up, I watched family members work hard. I mean, I come from probably more of a blue collar background when I think about my grandparents. Yeah. They were union workers, pipe fitters, steel mill workers. Yeah. And so that idea of working with your hands and figuring things out and being a physically hard worker was kind of ingrained in me. I think could it be genetically? Maybe. But I watched that growing up. I heard stories about that growing up. Yeah. And so it was natural for, me growing up that when the lawn needed to be mowed and dad said, go mow the lawn, you just went and push mowed the yard. Right. You didn't do your GPS, lawn mowers like they have now, or even a riding mower. Right. My kids laugh like, we have a decent sized yard, but there will not be a riding mower at our house because we're perfectly capable of pushing. Yeah. Even though a riding mower probably makes sense and would be a lot easier. Yeah. That doesn't build that grit, that work ethic that I think it takes. Yeah. But there's one moment that stands out in time for me that really drove me from understanding that what work ethic needed to take place in order to get a result. And I was a junior in high school. Okay. And I was the backup running back on a really good football team, played some special teams, but our team was ranked number 1 overall. And our starting running back got hurt. And I thought to myself, I'm the backup. Like it's my time now. Yeah. And they pulled up a sophomore kid who was a big kid. I mean, good athlete. I'm not knocking anything that he did. And they started him in front of me. Yeah. And so I worked up the courage to go talk to the coach and say, "Hey coach, why didn't I get a chance to play as the backup.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, we were looking for someone a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself at the time, it was devastating. In the moment that was devastating,
yeah,
it was also the moment that a switch went off in me.
Right.
And I realized you don't just get something because you're next in line or you think you deserve it.
Yeah.
You have to get something because you have to like show people that you're the best.
Yeah.
And so I realized at that moment, I could either wallow in my own self-pity.
Yeah.
Or I could become so flipping good that the coach was forced to play me.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And then my next year I came out and, had a great season and I ended up changing positions. But that was a moment that to me that really I held on to say, not everything is gifted to you, even if you're really, because I was pretty good. But sometimes you have to put the work ethic in order to prove that you're,
So motivation and determination went up to a 10.
Yes.
Did you start writing down goals? Did you start following a specific plan? Like, how did you know what to do next?
So part of it was I knew I needed to get stronger.
Okay.
And the people that I talked to, the coaches, some previous athletes on the team, you just got to put the work in the off season.
Yeah.
When no one else is looking, when everybody else is worried about Christmas break and the wintertime having it off and spring break. What am I doing? I'm in the gym lifting.
Yeah.
In the summer workout programs when everybody's just kind of like enjoying summer and taking it easy on 400-meter wind sprints, I'm sprinting all out.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I got laughed at.
Yeah.
A lot of people just thought I was, a try hard, right? Yeah. I didn't care.
Yeah.
There was a point in time in my life I probably would have cared.
Right.
But I was so motivated in this year since I heard that I wasn't big enough that it just set me off. And I did not care what anybody else thought. And I wish I would say that mindset has just been with me the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It ebbs and flows,
right.
But that moment sticks out in time, big time for me.
That's fantastic. So going through that and going into college, were you on a career path at that point, or what was your mindset when you found out like, hey, I can pretty much do what I want?
So the wheels fell off for me in college a little bit.
Okay.
For several reasons. I think one, I've become a very faith-based man, right? So I believe that God has a design for me. I'm a Christian, is my faith. And I grew up going to church. I grew up in a Christian family. But I never really had like an authentic relationship with God through Jesus. And so when I got to college, the moral circle that I ran in high school, I didn't have when I got to college.
Yeah.
So the accountability of like living a good moral life, the accountability of maintaining some self-discipline started to wane. It kind of fell off. And so when I got influenced by people that were partying and, I kind of got caught up in all of that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up playing a little bit of college football for a couple of years. I was on the team. I got injured. I couldn't play. And I just kind of wallowed in my self-pity. Instead of rising myself up, I started to get, well, now what am I going to do? I'm not worth anything.
Right.
I don't have any purpose anymore. I lost purpose. And that drove me deeper into not really depression, but just deeper into, I just want to have fun now.
Right.
So whatever I can do to have fun, which was drinking too much, partying too much, doing the things that you really shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And I was smart enough to maintain my grades.
Yeah.
So I was able to graduate and do all that stuff.
That's impressive.
Part of it was just, I was willing to show up to class.
Yeah.
But I did not thrive.
Okay.
And I think what ended up changing that largely was God had a plan for me.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't living it out and it didn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
And it took 9/11 to get me to stop thinking so much about how bad my life was and see an opportunity for me to go do a cause bigger than myself.
Okay.
So
9/11 happens. What was the following steps after that?
So I was in, what was I? I was 21 years old. I was in technically my senior year. I went an extra semester, but fall of 21 was my fall of my senior year. I had to take a course on a day in the life of through the business school. So different professions would come in and tell us what their life was like as an accountant, as a project manager, marketing manager, these things. Well, this Marine Corps officer comes in a flight suit and starts talking about joining the Marine Corps as an officer.
Yeah.
You can be a fighter pilot, you can lead Marines. And this was right after 9/11. And the hairs on the back of my head stood up. He's talking about teamwork.
Yeah.
And I always thrived on a team. And I thought, man, this is something that I'm interested in. So I sat after class and talked with him for an hour, told him about my shoulder injury. And I was worried I wouldn't get accepted.
Yeah.
And he said, nope, we get guys all the time. As long as you're healthy and you can pass these tests,
right,
you'll go through a waiver program and you can apply. So I had already taken a job with John Hancock to go through their financial services. So fast forward a few months, I had gone through the application process. So now I'm in the fall of 22.
Yeah.
And I decided right before I started with John Hancock that I was gonna quit and join the Marines.
Yeah.
And so I spent all of 2003, or sorry, 2003.
He's a time traveler.
Yeah, 2003, going through the application process and got accepted to the Marine Corps and joined in January of 2004.
What was the discussion with friends and family about that? Were they supportive? Were they saying, hey, you got this big money job coming up? What was going on there?
Everybody, very few people were unsupportive. Okay. Everybody was supportive. That's and nice. Actually, a lot of people said, we're not surprised.
Okay.
It started to kind of fit that personality that I had. I lost a little bit when I stopped playing football.
Yeah.
But I kind of got it back. That motivation, that thriving in a team environment, that work ethic.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, okay, this makes sense.
Okay.
And I had, at the time, this is funny, that was mainly my family. Friends were kind of a little bit confused. Like, what? You just went through college. Why would you join the military?
Yeah.
Well, they had a program where you could join with a buddy. So like, let's say you and I were friends.
Yeah.
We went in, we joined the Marine Corps together, and we could go through schooling together.
Yeah.
And then ultimately try and be in the same units and this kind of thing to entice people to want to join.
Yeah.
So I went and I talked to some of my buddies. I said, hey guys, like we could go be fighter pilots.
Yeah.
And they looked at me and were like, what? Like, Matt, there's no way you can do that. And I said, well, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And make a long story short, some of the buddies that I had, Matt, and one guy's name was Eric. His name was Matt too. And I sent him a picture the first time I climbed into the cockpit of I flew a Cobra helicopter.
Okay.
So the first time I flew in, it kind of looks like a jet inside.
Right.
I took a picture of myself and I sent it to him, and they wrote back and like, well, you did it. So, but a lot of the guys did not want to even entertain the idea. Yeah. And I was all in.
What was the mindset against that? Because I know even when I was in school, it was you go to high school, you get okay grades, you go to college, you pay out the nose, but your college degree is going to pay tenfold whatever you paid for that college. Like that's what I was always told going through high school. What was the conversation around it for you at that time?
You mean going from college into the military?
Yeah.
So I think largely it was ignorance.
Okay.
All right. First off, when I heard that they call him an OSO, officer selection officer.
Right.
I didn't even know you could go to the military after college.
Okay.
I thought there was West Point, there was Air Force Academy and Naval Academy, and I didn't even know about Marine Corps. That's how ignorant I was. And so when I brought it up to my buddies, it just seemed like out of sight, out of mind. Like that's not something that's in my psyche.
Right.
Therefore, does not compute.
Yeah.
I'm going to go toward the professional career that I've spent this last 4 years studying for, preparing to go do. And for me, I don't think college satisfied that adventure desire in me.
Yeah.
All the partying, all the chasing, all the doing things, it left a huge empty hole in me.
Yeah, the dopamine was there.
The temporary dopamine, but the adventure of it, and I go back to the faith-based thing. I shouldn't say faith-based. The faith-based component of my life was there was something missing in me, and I profess the Christian faith, but no matter what faith background you're from, it's largely understanding, just like with F3 that we're a part of, there is a cause bigger than yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, in college, I was all about self-satisfaction.
Right.
What's going to satisfy my desire to, party tonight or hang out or chase women or whatever it is. And it felt empty.
Yeah.
And I don't associate Marine Corps with a faith. Mm-hmm. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying in order to be faith-based, you got to join the military. But what that did is it got me out of my shell, out of my personal chasing my own fleshly desires. And it said, no, Matt, we're going to use you in a cause bigger than yourself in this team environment.
Yeah.
And I really thrived in that. Mm-hmm. That's what I needed.
So, well, not necessarily getting reintroduced, but more faith-based, does that look like a constant talking to God? Is that reading gospel? How does one have more faith in their life? Like you said, transitioning through.
So, in the Christian faith, it starts with, understanding that we are all in need of a savior.
Okay.
Right. So, even though I would argue I didn't kill anybody, wasn't a serial liar. Like I didn't have like all these like 10 commandment type sins. When I really examined my life, I was selfish.
Yeah.
I was lustful. I was, prideful. Like all these things were within me, and I needed to be rescued from that. And so it started with recognizing that. And that wasn't on my own. I had some neighbors in Florida when I got through flight school that were inviting me to church. And I was kind of like starting to hear this in my head. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's missing. I don't have a personal relationship with God. So these questions started getting answered. And once I kind of made the declaration, like, God, I need to be saved, and I'm going to recognize Christ as my savior in the Christian faith, that got me on a path of what we call sanctification. In other words, the growing of your faith. Started reading the Bible. I started talking to God personally. I started sitting in quiet time and being like, okay, like, God, how do you want me to handle this situation?
Right.
Whether it was a relationship issue, a professional issue, whatever it could be. So all those things, we call them spiritual disciplines: prayer, Bible reading, church attendance. Like they help grow you in your faith because you become kind of, I don't want to say knowledgeable, because knowledgeable isn't everything. It's the wisdom and the discernment process that puts you through that helps you grow in your faith.
Okay. So in going through the Marines, does that show up every day? Like, oh, this is pretty tough, but with Christ, like things are becoming easy. Does your self-talk change? What is that?
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up because there is the sanctification process to me is lifelong. Okay. Right. What the Marine Corps did is it ultimately brought me closer to God. It did so not because of necessarily like anything I was doing or that the Marine Corps did, but more of, I wouldn't even say faith is a big part of Marines. Okay. Right. It's not like that was kind of my personal reaction to what I went through. But what the Marine Corps really taught me was this idea of service, right? This is probably a little bit of a I don't mean to steer this too off topic, but a lot of people think that when I spent a lot of time in combat, right? And when you're in combat, you are not thinking like, I'm protecting the freedoms of Americans, right? Yeah. In combat, you are handling things as they come to you at that point in time. You're largely fighting for the people to your left and to your right. Okay. Now, the mission itself, like I at the time, I believed in the mission. Where I'm at now, I still believe in, fighting for freedom, and that's a whole different discussion. But at the time, the Marine Corps taught me about service. Like I'm here to serve these guys to my right and to my left. Yeah. As a Cobra pilot, I'm an attack helicopter pilot, so I'm bringing a sense of aviation fire support, missiles, guns to the battlefield, not because of Matt's own personal glory, but because I'm trying to help these guys in their mission on the ground. So it got me thinking about service and servant leadership and how to make things better for other people. And that mindset really flowed well for me into my faith.
Okay. So how many years were we in for? Was there a time where like, I need to get out now and didn't get out? What was that process for us?
So I joined in January of 2004 and I got out in May of 2013. So roughly 9.5 years. I went through flight school. So all Marines go through a ground infantry course. That was about a year long. Then I went through 2 years of flight school. And then I spent 6.5 years in what we call the fleet, the active duty part of the active side of the Marine Corps. You're not in a school environment. Yeah. I did 3 tours, 1 to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. Okay. And it was on my third deployment to my second one to Afghanistan, where I realized that I was starting to run out of steam.
Okay.
And my wife and I had our first child. So I'm away from my wife and our oldest daughter.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of things that happened on that deployment in a combat zone, even some red tape stuff, fighting through the red tape of rules of engagement and different things in the chain of command that just, it wore me out.
Yeah.
And I got home and I realized I got to get out.
Yeah.
But it took me 2 years to really go through that process. So I took a non-deploying billet where I was gone even more.
Okay.
And we'd had our second child. So I'm continuing to miss a lot of time. And in August of 2012, I basically submitted all my paperwork and I was discharged in May of 13.
So why does it take so long to get out? Is it because you have to serve a certain, you sign a contract? What?
Yeah. So it's different for everybody. For me, I had a contract I had to fulfill.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason why it took from August to May to get out. But also there's a process. I mean, sometimes that process can take 30 to 60 days. It's basically an out processing. You got to go through a bunch of paperwork, medical tests, and different things to make sure you're healthy, that you're leaving. The Marine Corps, contrary to probably popular belief, I actually think they do a pretty good job of putting you through, not like a psych eval, but they do want to make sure that when you leave, you have access to the help you need. You have access to mental, health if you need it.
Yeah.
That was 2013.
Yeah.
So I got to believe there's even more availability now than there was 11 years ago. And I felt good leaving. I mean,
sounds like you're still working for them now.
It's a little.
So what do you think that the people complaining about it, what do you think they're just not accessing it properly, or where do you think things are falling short?
I think the squeaky wheel gets the microphone sometimes.
Okay.
The people that complain the loudest are the ones that sometimes get the most attention.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily an epidemic. I think there's other problems within the Marine Corps that probably for a different podcast we could get into.
Yeah.
But I mean, overall, my experience with the Marines was phenomenal.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't know if I'd want to do it again, but I'm definitely glad that I did it.
Yeah.
But I still tell people to this day, if there is if the Mongolian hordes are at the border of Canada and I need to go help defend this homeland, I would go again.
Yeah.
But again, I think most people have a pretty positive experience.
Okay.
The Marine Corps is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Some people get in thinking, this is going to be, I'm going to become some sort of just, badass, kind of guy. And they get in and they realize, well, that's not really what we're doing here. And it's well, maybe that wasn't for you, or maybe it's harder than most people think.
Yeah.
It is hard.
Yeah.
But overall, my experience was good. People that are getting out that maybe be complaining.
Yeah.
They could maybe just have misaligned expectations for what they think is supposed to be there.
Yeah.
They could have had a totally different experience than I did.
Yeah.
Some people, even though I was in a combat zone, they were in a different combat zone and didn't get the kind of support that I did, or maybe they got much better support than I did. So it's a big organization.
Yeah.
It's not all the same experience. So,
so when we get out, did we have a plan for our life? Was the church helping put us in a position to succeed? What was there for you?
I did not have a good plan. I would never advocate that somebody do the plan that I did. Once again, part of the sanctification process was I was filled with a lot of pride when I left.
Okay.
And so here I am. I was a captain in the Marine Corps. I was right before I was getting ready to pin on major, which is the next rank for me. And I was briefing general officers. I was part of Marine Corps Special Operations Command, and I felt pretty good about myself. So coming out of the Marine Corps, I thought, man, people are going to want my skill set.
Yeah.
They're going to want me to, brief high level, take on projects, and things were just crickets.
Really?
No one came knocking on my door.
Yeah.
And I thought, why? And it took me about 6 months to realize, because I didn't do anything.
Okay. I
didn't actively pursue anybody. I didn't go and chase after these jobs that I wanted. I just thought something was going to fall in my lap because of, I thought I was good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case. And so my wife and I had saved up a bunch of money, or at the time I thought it was a bunch of money. And when you're raising a family with 2 kids and not a lot of income, money goes pretty quickly. And so I realized I needed to start doing something. And so, make a long story short, we moved out of North Carolina back to here.
Yeah.
And in the fall of 2013, and I started, well, a little bit of a blip. I did a little bit of insurance sales, realized I'm not meant for inside sales, and started doing side jobs.
Yeah.
I started painting and pulling weeds and cleaning gutters and power washing houses and staining decks. And I really had to swallow my pride because I would do that for $20 an hour.
Yeah. Did you have an ad out? Did you have cardboard? What was?
It was, I just used my warm network.
Okay.
And it was slow going.
Yeah.
I would do it completely different now, knowing the power of information and how you can get into people's homes through social media, through mailers and direct mail. I would totally do things differently.
Right.
But at the time, all I knew what to do was to go to work. And so it was a very small snowball, but it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And it took about 3.5, 4 years before I was able to pay all my bills in 1 year through the income I was generating on my own.
Wow.
And then I ended up joining up and merged with A&A Painting that I'm a part of now. And me and my business partner are 50-50 owners.
Yeah.
And our 2025 goal is to do 3 million in revenue, and it's just really taken off.
So the 3 to 4 years of snowballing, was that side jobs, was all painting and stuff like that, or
mostly in the painting handyman space?
Okay.
I found a little bit of a gap. One of the ways I've got a lot of my customers, not a lot of people around here like to restain decks, just because they're so hard to maintain.
Yeah.
And I just found that being really honest and being a really hard worker, I was able to gain a foothold in that little realm.
Yeah.
And so I would start staining and some minor repairs to these decks, rotten wood and things like that. And I think one summer I probably did 65 decks on my own, which was just like,
that's a lot of work.
Again, another epiphany was I was staining a deck one day, and I started doing the math in my head on how many decks I was going to have to stain in order to put one of my kids through college.
Yeah.
And I couldn't sleep. No. I couldn't sleep for like 3 days. Oh, no. It was like the anxiety of it. And I realized I needed to do this, I needed to use leverage. I needed to find some way to have people help me get this business going. And that's really when I started looking for help. And
so when you have those problems, do you go to like a circle of friends that you have? Do you go to the internet? What are the steps that you make?
I do all of it.
Okay.
I think it's incredibly powerful to maintain great relationships. So I like to surround myself with people who are in a position where I want to get to. I love being around business owners.
Yeah.
Business owners, I will gladly help business owners that are in, maybe doing a little bit smaller than our company.
Yeah.
And I can still learn from them, but I'm constantly seeking out advice from those that are 2, 3, 5 years ahead of me. Yeah. Because I want to know what it took to get to that point.
Right.
So I can start preparing myself. I take them problems. I buy lots of lunches and lots of coffee because I value their time. And so I want to take advantage of it as much as possible. And so I spend a lot of time doing that. I love listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
There's one, I'll plug this one. My family will laugh when they hear this, but the Founders podcast.
Okay. What's that one about?
It's about founders of companies.
Okay.
Or founders of movements that this guy reads biographies and autobiographies, and then he gives you an hour executive summary.
Who runs that? Is that the Home Depot guy?
No. I'll look it up and I'll let you know what it is.
Well, I remember the CEO of Home Depot was doing a podcast, and I thought it was something similar around that. I thought.
I love learning from those type of people.
Yeah.
I read, the biblical wisdom.
Okay.
The book of Proverbs specifically gives you a lot of wisdom on how to handle relational money situations. So I rely a lot on that. A lot of just thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably know this. Nobody thinks anymore. Like the idea of like, I'm going to sit and just for 5 minutes, I'm going to think about this problem.
Right.
Like try to sit for 5 minutes and do nothing.
Yeah.
And just think.
Well,
it's hard.
It's nice with a child now, though. If I'm like, all right, I'm going to put my phone down and just hold my sleeping baby. And it's just like, oh, this is wild. Haven't done this. Haven't done this in a minute.
There's so many things that we can put through our heads. Music, information, podcast. And not all of them are bad.
Right.
But the idea of just sitting and just pondering.
Yeah.
Call it meditating. Call it prayer, whatever you want. it's just a lost art. And
for sure.
I would say that's a practice in my life that has really helped me.
That's fantastic. So when you see something like that, I feel like we're in an age in which you listen to as many books as possible, you read as many self-help books or whatever as books as possible, but integrating those things into your life, how do you decide what's going to work for you? Do you have a hierarchy of, I know this is going to be the best one, so I'm going to work really hard at this? Or how does that work for you?
So this is an interesting topic because I'm not sure there's a wrong answer on how to handle a situation. I know that there's character traits and there's ways that you can handle a situation, to me, that are always correct. Number one, you can always handle things with integrity, right? You can always have a good work ethic towards something. You can always be honest, right? Like there's like certain character traits that are always good in a situation. But how to like put where the rubber meets the road, I think it's trial and error.
Okay.
And it's trial and error from either learning from what someone did before you, on what went wrong or what went right, or it's your own experience.
Yeah.
Right. So take parenting, for instance. I know that if I just go to my 14, she'll be 15 next month, or 15 in 2 weeks. If I go to my soon to be 15-year-old daughter and I just like get on her for something she did wrong, I've learned that is not a good way to approach the situation with her. I've got a son who I may just have to hammer him into submission to get him to like correct a behavior that's not good.
Right.
Two different ways to handle people underneath the same roof. So learning through that can give us wisdom on how to handle a situation one way or the other. But trial and error is a great way to do it.
How do you deal with failure in regards to trying something new?
I don't deal with it well because I'm a people pleaser.
Okay. Not the answer I was expecting.
Right. I want people to like me. I want people to like my process. I want people to like my company. I want people, but I also know that a good leader is not going to be liked by everybody because you got to make hard decisions.
Okay.
So I don't handle failure great, even though I know it's good for me.
Okay.
So I think sometimes one of the best things you can do as a leader is recognize where you're weak and bring people in to help make you strong in that aspect.
Yeah.
So I don't handle customers not having a great experience with A&A painting very well. And I get defensive and sometimes I take it personal. Yeah. And I would work through it. I mean, I think most customers have always end up having a good experience with me. But I knew I wasn't great at that. So I sought out someone who was better and I hired them as my project manager. Okay. Right. So it's recognizing where you're failing and where you may not be very good. Yeah. And how can you solve that? Maybe you need to bring someone else in. Okay. And so one of the best ways that I handle failure is just being humble. Yeah. And I didn't always have that. So growing older makes you makes you a little bit more humble.
You could definitely tell the old people that have been humbled and the ones that they're not gonna take it. They're still fighting it.
It's a great quality to have as a human being because it I don't know. I'm a big builder of relationships. I talked about that earlier. Yeah. I think relationships are so much more fruitful than anything else. Absolutely. Most people on their deathbed will tell you like they wish they would have invested more time with this person or that person, which to me is relational, right? Yeah. So if that's the dying wishes of most human beings, why would we not spend more time doing that in this life? And so, relationally is just super important to me. And so I always try to take things back. Like, how can I continue to have a great relationship with this person in spite of the situation that we're in? Yeah. And so with that thought process, I think that helps me, deal with the failure. And I think you have to be humble and recognize, you know what, the best thing is probably just for me to go say, I'm sorry. Yeah. Right. Or to say, hey, I didn't handle that well, or we screwed that up. Let me fix it. Yeah. So
that's very tough for many people to do these days.
It's almost, it's not celebrated. Yeah. It's
I think because so many people are looking for gotchas or I win, or I'm going to use this against you next time. It's very tough to, hey, we're working on this together. It's more of I'm getting ammo on for the next one.
And I think, the idea of absorbing criticism and reflecting praise is not something that's preached as far as a great leadership trait. Unless you really dig into some of the greatest leaders that we've ever had. A lot of them, we probably don't even know their names. Jim Collins wrote in his book, Good to Great. I don't know if you ever heard of that book.
I know Phil Collins, and now
Okay.
Jim.
All right. Well,
I'm missing the name.
Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great, and it's what makes a company go from good to great. And he had all this criteria that he did.
Yeah.
But there's a chapter in there called Level 5 Leaders, and the Level 5 leaders are people you pretty much have never heard of. They're not your They're not your Jamie Dimon who runs JP Morgan. The people out in front. They're really not Donald Trump and all these like loud leaders that you hear on the pulpit.
Yeah.
They're quiet, reserved, full of integrity, servant leaders. I'm not saying that those people can't be servant leaders, but you just don't hear their names because they, deflect praise. They give it to their team. And so Level 5 Leaders is one of the best chapters of any book I've ever read.
So what's the full name of the book?
Good to Great.
Good to Great
by Jim Collins.
Wonderful. Yep. So a little bit of a rewind. How did you get started with F3?
So this goes back to I can't remember if it was the fall of 2017 or I think it was spring of 2018. My daughter was playing soccer.
Okay.
I was coaching a group of second and third graders. And one of the dads in that group, I had coached his daughter for a couple seasons, spring, fall, approached me one day and said, "Hey, my brother is working out at this, group in Naperville.
Yeah.
One Saturday, would you like to join me? I'm thinking about going."
Yeah.
Well, he had gone a couple times before me, and he finally invited me, and I went in November of 2018 with James Hood, and we know him as Mini-Me.
Yeah.
And Mini-Me invited. I went to Naperville, and it was a convergence with like 60 dudes there, and down on the south side of Naperville, and I started going with him. We went every Saturday. And then
what was it? 6:15, 5:15?
It was at 6:30 on Saturday mornings.
Okay.
And the Nantan in Naperville saw where we were coming from, and the Nantan is the kind of the leader of the group, and he said, "You guys need to break off and start an F3 Geneva." And he largely approached Mini-Me with this.
Yeah.
And Mini-Me was one of these guys who's really great at technical work, but did not want to be kind of the face or the leader out front.
Yeah.
And he asked me if I would kind of take that role. And I said, sure thing. And so him and I teamed up, and really he did most of the work. I just did what I enjoy. I got out in front and I led and kind of motivated people and had a great time doing it. And we started F3 in March of 2019.
Okay.
And it was the two of us for a lot of days and just slowly got wheels. And really it's a testament to the men of F3, what it's become here today.
Do you have a best opener that like a success rate for getting people to show up? Like what like, or was it just purely numbers? Like how did you turn guys in?
I'm always fascinated by largely men's decision making. Like what makes someone decide to do something?
Yeah.
And so I took largely a numbers based approach.
Okay.
But then I think there's men that just realize whatever I'm living right now is too painful for me. I need something to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a driving factor. So it's getting the information out to as many men and then letting them come to their own conclusion that F3 is a good place for them.
Yeah.
I don't know that my life needed to change at the time I joined F3. I just knew it was like right in my wheelhouse. I was like, it almost reminds me kind of what the Marine Corps is. The camaraderie, the fellowship, the like grunting it out in the 38-degree rainy days.
on a good day.
I mean, those really, that's where the fellowship gets built.
Yeah.
To me, that's where the trust gets built.
Yeah.
And so I would tell guys, if you're looking for great fellowship, come to F3.
Yeah.
If you're looking just for a great workout, you may get that, but it may not satisfy everything you want in a workout. But if you want great fellowship, come to F3. I think that's really what I love about it.
So when you started bringing people in, what were you highlighting to them? How could you tell that they were looking for something? So
I just really didn't know at the time.
Okay.
I just said, hey guys, we're getting ready to start this men's workout group. There's a workout coming up this Saturday. Here's what time. There's a bunch of guys coming, and it's fitness, fellowship, and faith. A little bit about what that meant.
Yeah.
And then just kind of threw it out there to the masses.
Yeah.
And I think Mini-Me and I we invited 50, like kind of started the way I did my business.
Yeah.
Family, friends, people from church.
Yeah.
And, we got a decent amount that first day.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like slowly died off. And then it just started to, it's just a little snowball, and it just kept growing and growing from there.
Yeah.
But I think largely it was just accurately portraying what F3 is and ensuring guys what it's not.
Yeah.
Right. We're not here for your money. We're not here. It's not Matt's group. It's not Mini-Me's group or Dr. Evil's group. This is a group of men.
Yeah.
And if you want to come build some great fellowship with a group of men, probably a good place for you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I sold it.
No, I think it's grown very well, especially in the last couple of years.
It's been unbelievable what it's doing. And I think it's awesome. I'm still so thankful to be a part of it. And the guys are awesome. So.
I ran into Wet Fuse. I'm awful with names. At Kid Strong, he's like, "Hey, are you a highlighter?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "I saw you at football." I was like, yeah, that was probably the one time that month." I was like, I gotta show up more. So for you, what does F3 fulfill for you?
It has, it continues to be a source of discipline for me.
Okay.
You ask me, 6 months from now on a Wednesday morning at 5:45, where are you going to be? I will probably be at the Arrowhead working out with Watts, and I can start naming people that are typically there. So it creates a rhythm for me to my life. Right. I work out 4 days a week at F3, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. It's that rhythm is super important to me in my life. It's created lifelong friends. Mm-hmm. I use some of the guys that are older than me as like counsel. Yeah. They know who they are. Yeah. There's times in my life where I just need to talk to somebody. Maybe that's not my dad. That's a little bit older than me that can just be a sounding board, right? Whether it's a family situation or I'm just frustrated with work or something. And the guys have been there for that. So the friendships have just become phenomenal. Yeah. And I love going through hard things with guys that I love. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, there's guys that I only see them at F3 and I feel like they would give me the shirt off their back just because we've crawled through mud together. Right. Like those are the kind of things that it does for me, is it just gives me that sense of I've got a group of guys that I know I can rely on if and when I need them.
So how do you deal with the waking up in the morning? Was there ever a period where like, I'm going to get more sleep, or how did you push through that stop for you?
I go to bed early.
Okay.
So in the Marine Corps taught me how to back plan. Right. Okay. So in the Marine Corps, as an attack helicopter pilot, we would often train for what we call TOT, time on target. So the time that the missile actually has to hit the target, and you back plan everything off that. What's the flight time of the missile from the point where you're going to hit the wing arm fire button to like how much? There's 40 seconds. Okay, I need to be in the battle position 2 minutes prior to that time, and all the way back to when you actually start the aircraft. Right, like all of this. I do the same thing in this life. Yeah. Okay. I know if I'm going to try and get 7 hours of sleep, I'm getting up at 4:40 to be there at 5:15. Well, what's 7 hours prior to 4:40? That's 9:40, right? So I need to be in bed, lights out by 9:40. Yeah. So I just start to plan backwards. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's how I think about it in my mind.
Yeah. Just simple. Do what you say you're going to do.
The hardest thing about F3 is literally the first 3 seconds to get out of bed. Yeah. As soon as you're out of bed, everything else is easier. Yeah. That's the hardest part.
So with going to bed early, and do you feel like it takes up a lot of your life, or it's more of just it fills up your glass, it doesn't take away from it?
It fills up my glass. The idea that it's early morning, if F3 was from 5:15 at night to 6:30, I would not be as dedicated. Yeah. That early morning, no one else is up. Yeah. It does not take away from family. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's made my family and my marriage better. Yeah. It's a time, it's going out. I don't like to necessarily say going out for beers, but it's going out for beers with your buddy before anybody else is even up, because we go to coffee a lot. Yeah. We can go build fellowship over a cup of coffee. The same thing we would do is if we met at, the bar and grill and had 2 beers together. Yeah. I love that because it doesn't take away from any time with my family. Do I have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep? Maybe. Yeah. But it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as your life now, we're in the new year. Is there things that you're working on for the next year? Obviously you said the business, but is there anything else you're striving for?
I'm not a big New Year's resolution guy or that sort of thing, but I do recognize the new year is an opportunity to make some adjustments, changes, kind of fresh start on some things. My wife and I were just talking about this the other day. I feel like I've lost a little bit of intentionality. In other words, living in the moment. There's times where my mind is constantly racing, whether it's a Bible study I'm doing or a book that I'm reading, podcasts I'm listening to, business, systems I'm trying to get better at, a customer situation I got to handle. That when I'm sitting with my 9-year-old playing, cards or a game, my mind is somewhere else and I'm not living in that moment. And I feel like that's not only cheating me, it's cheating her out of that quality time. And I want to work on that.
Yeah.
And how you tangibly gauge whether you're doing good on that, I don't really know. I just want to be more intentional and live in the moment at the moment that I'm in.
Love that. I know there's 3 different parts that we can go for the podcast, so we'll probably add an extra hour, but we'll finish off the last 2 questions and then we'll have another one later. What is your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
I think health to me is being able to do what you want to do with the body and the environment that you're in. So if you want to be able to get up and go exercise and you're unable to do that, then that's not being healthy. So, does that mean that doesn't take into account diet and exercise? It certainly does. But for me, if I'm not able to run 3 miles and do it in a way where I get that runner's high, then maybe I'm not as healthy as I thought I was.
Okay.
If I want to go and start lifting heavy weight, but I don't have the right bone density, then I'm not as healthy as I thought I was. So I think for me, as long as I'm able to be active and do the things I want to do, then I'm healthy. And it's probably more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a desire to sit around and watch TV. Like I want to be active. And as long as I'm capable of being active, then I've got that healthy, I got that healthy lifestyle.
Perfect. And then what's something from your life that people listening to the podcast would be able to take away as a positive?
Live in a world filled with hope. To me, sometimes we start seeing what other people are living with and and we think, oh, well, that person has it better than me. And we get too focused on what they are and we kind of lose hope in what God has planned for our own lives. And I would say if we don't live with hope, then what purpose do we have?
Yeah.
And so I always say, I want the best 4 years of my life to be the last 4 years of my life. And so to me, that's constantly living with that idea that I'm hoping next year is better than this year. I'm hoping 2027 is better than 2026. And I think living with that mindset will help you start to focus on the things that are really good in your life. And so that's kind of something I want people to take away.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
I really enjoyed it.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Athlete. And listen up, this could make a real difference. I've been using Vital Athlete Freeze Roll-On for the last 6 months. I stopped using regular painkillers about 10 years ago because of the negative side effects on your liver and kidneys. Vital Athletes understands this. They've created a CBD roll-on specifically for pain and injury relief. Their Freeze Roll-On gives you fast-acting relief right where you need it, so you can keep going. If you care about getting the most out of every workout, then Vital Athlete is for you.